Where are you? Present day. The full moon began its ascent into the sky. All around the effects could be seen or felt. Tides shifted, animals became restless, lovers drew closer. But for one, the effects are building, agonizing, and awaited. Sweat poured from the man's face, soaking his shirt as his breathing became heavy. He peered up at the eastern wall, as though his bloodshot eyes could see through it and track the pale orb. Henry Kilbourne. It began in August, under a full moon much like the one rising now. In Nestor County, kids were getting underway for getting back to school, buying their supplies, clothes, new shoes, getting their haircuts, or at least getting dragged around by their parents to get such things done, and otherwise spending the rest of the time trying to fit in as much fun and relaxation as they could before the waning days of freedom ended. And while most parents started putting curfew on their own children to ease them back into bedtimes and early mornings, some turned a bit of a blind eye. Let the young be the young while they can, right? In T-Town, Henry Kilbourne's parents felt that way. Even at 16, an age where many boys felt like the urge to rebel against their parents and teachers, more interested in the attention of peers and crushes, Henry rarely talked back, always remembered his chores, and frankly didn't pester them for a car they couldn't afford, even though he did get his license on the first try. So if he, say, stayed a bit late at his friend Tommy's house for an evening or two, so long as it wasn't the school year yet, well, he was a teenager after all. What was the harm? That night of the full moon, the harm struck in all its dark hunger. Henry called his house from Tommy's, letting them know he was on his way home. The path between the two houses by bicycle should have taken just under half an hour. Henry's legs burned a little as he pedaled. He'd taken this path through the woodlands areas plenty of times, ever since he was a little kid. Tonight, something was wrong. He could feel eyes on him, following him, measuring him. The feeling faded for a moment, then the sound started. It was a low, snarling sound, along with the snapping of twigs and branches, keeping pace with him. He pedaled faster and the snarl increased, the snapping more erratic. He risked a glance over his shoulder, the moonlight showing trees, bushes, and some kind of form, shaggy and hunched, hurrying through the woods at high speed. He turned away in terror when the roar exploded behind him and something huge knocked him from his bike. He struggled to rise as the shaggy figure lumbered closer. His last thought was, Mom was right. I should have left earlier. After 2 hours of no sign of him, his mother called Tommy's, confirmed he left long ago, and proceeded into panic. The police were called, the situation explained, and the search began with interviewing the families in a single patrol car, slowly driving from where Henry left, cruising along the forced shortcut everyone agreed he'd often take to get home. Nearly halfway down that path, they found his bike. It looked like it had been in a collision of some kind, though hard to tell with what. Maybe a pothole, maybe a deer. They were always a problem for drivers and bike riders when the sun went down. Though some of the officers quietly wondered if it was less of someone rather than a something. A prolonged search of the area turned up some kind of churned earth, but no conclusive sign of Henry or his abductor. With few witnesses they could find added little to the search. Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith sighed through his nose as he read the headline, T-Town Teen Vanishes. He selected a pen, carefully placed it in the map on the wall. A length of red thread carefully tied around it, stretching off the map to be secured. Smith shook his head and turned off the light. Present day. The moon climbed higher into the sky, and below the figure groaned, a sound so guttural and deep it sounded like his soul was suffering. Beneath his skin the muscles tried to swell and stretch, and beneath them the bones suffered until they snapped. He screamed, fingers gripping at the newspapers around him, the heavy pounding in his chest increasing as the moon called to his heart, igniting a hunger in his bones, a hunger that will only be satiated with the hunt. Melissa Traker. As she walked to the store that cool September evening, 17-year-old Krillberg resident wasn't thinking about Henry Kilbourne. For that matter, nobody in Wilfrid County was. After all, what business was it of theirs what happened 2 counties over? For Melissa, all that mattered was getting the milk her mother asked for her on the way home after study hall. The convenience store was only a couple of blocks from the school, and they all knew her well there. They would be the last ones to see her. Security cameras and clerks' interviews confirmed she arrived at 4:40 p.m. The little bell attached to the stop and save jangled as it opened, bringing Hal's attention up from the magazine on the counter. The familiar smiling face and head full of iron-curled blonde hair came bopping in, and he grinned. "Hey there, Mel. You're running a bit late this evening." "Evening, Hal. Study hall ran long. Mrs. Bannock insisted on checking our work before we could leave." She opened the cooler door and grabbed a jug of milk. On their way to the counter, she paused and snagged a couple of candy bars. "Bummer. You're gonna have to hurry if you want to get home before the creepy crawlies come out." He made ooh fingers at her, and she rolled her eyes. He chuckled. "Mom's account?" "If you could." "Done and done. Have a good one." He grinned as she tucked one bar in her pocket, grabbed the milk, and had a bite out of the first chocolate bar before she was even out the door. The walk was longer than she remembered. Night had come fast, and she still hadn't been past the wooded area that still existed between neighborhoods. And now she was running for her life. Something evil was chasing her, snarling, roaring, something she couldn't identify. She'd already hurled the heavy milk jug at it wildly and broke into a full sprint. She knew it was useless, it was too fast, but maybe she was hit hard from behind. She felt herself lifted off her feet, felt herself being dragged. She wanted to just go home. She just wanted... Everything went dark. Mr. Smith. He put aside the paper for what little information it contained. The police got a call from the parents, search party sent out, found a jug of sour milk, a lost shoe, and markings that looked like somebody had been dragged away fast before vanishing into the woods. As he pressed a second pin into place and tied the string, he glanced down and noticed mention of the full moon. An offhand remark, really, noting how helpful it was in lighting up the search area. He perused the rest of the article, but found the only reference back to Kilbourne abduction. Useless idiots. He huffed, tossing the paper down and stepping away. Present day. Everything was agony. His skin burned, bones feeling like they'd shattered and were trying to pull back together sliver by sliver. His muscles at the same time bulging outward and stretching, forming half his body into a broken parody of humanity. Claw-tipped fingers dragged him across the floor of the RV, the faces of the missing teens staring up at him from the papers beneath, their empty, smiling faces staring into his soul as he tried to hurl them away. Out. He needs to be outside. He all but hurls himself against the door, the flimsy lock snapping like an old cracker, as his rapidly expanding body hit the mud and slush around the vehicle. Did the fur grow on his body, or rip its way through the flesh, shredding the useless for the necessary? Flesh for fur, nails for claws, stubby teeth for razor fangs. Out here the light of the moon is balm and blaze, soothing parts of his mind while the rest of his body sheds what's left of its human disguise. Sarah Tillman. Sarah cursed herself softly as she hurried home. This was stupid. This was beyond stupid. Even though those two kids weren't missing, this plan had to have been the dumbest any girl in Milt had ever come up with. Hell, in all of Jeroboam County. She had just gotten ungrounded for having Bobby over when they was babysitting her little brother and sister. And her idea for a fantastic plan was to sneak out and see him? She was just so... Gah. Her father was always going on about her grades, and her mother would just not help her convince him that she needed her own car. I mean, hello, she only failed the test twice so far. And Bobby was so sweet and handsome and always listened, and well, he was a pretty good kisser, truth be told. So after another fight with the parental units that consisted of Dad talking about how he'd been valedictorian, he'd worked 3 jobs to get through college, he'd never asked for a handout from Uncle Sam, he'd walked on water and healed the plague with just his sweat and tears. Okay, he didn't go that far, but some days. And Mom just nodding along. Listen to your father, dear. Set a good example for Paul and Maggie. Pretend you don't notice me staring at old yearbooks with glasses of wine and wishing. Ugh, okay. So she'd snuck out, went to see Bobby. They'd started making out a bit. And suddenly it wasn't afternoon anymore. It was getting dark. And of course Bobby doesn't have his license either, so what could she do? Well, at this point, her brain snarked at her. We could have called home and just faced the music. But no. We decided, hey, we'll walk home. In the dark. And sure, let's take the back street past Mrs. Milgrain's and the old logging road. God, she needed to move to a real city. Somewhere that wasn't a couple of miles from the nearest county line as the crow flies. She pulled her coat closer as the October winds blew some of the colorful dead leaves that remained on the trees off and into dancing dust devils, ever-changing piles. They'd be getting pumpkins soon to turn into jack-o'-lanterns. And if she wasn't grounded forever, she and the siblings would get to pick out costumes. She focused on these thoughts to ignore the news her father watched religiously, which these days kept going on and on about Henry someone and Melissa what's-her-name, kids from other counties who she figured must have gotten sick of their parents and just hoofed it for New York or California or anywhere not in the Eastland area. She needed the distraction because the news didn't think that they left on their own. TV and papers felt something terrible had happened to them. The rumor mill at Buckbrook High said they both were missing on a full moon. Sarah started walking faster. She was not going to look up. She was not going to see it was a full moon. She was going to hurry home, and she was going to ignore the sound of something moving around in the bushes behind her. She was going to run. She was going to run. She was going to scream for help from these nice people. And oh God, she can almost feel it's breathing on her neck. And it's getting closer. Someone, please, oh God, please! The authorities interviewed Mrs. Henrietta Milgrains, age 85, who claimed she heard a ruckus going on by her back fence. She thought it was some of the local dogs until she realized it sounded like someone shouting for help, maybe screaming. But by the time she'd found her old friend, a double-barrel shotgun, and the shells, sounds had stopped. She'd hurried to the back door, snapping 2 shells into place. Her eyesight apparently not being the best, she had a vague sense of a moving shape heading up into the woods near the logging trail. Could it have been an animal? Maybe. Could it have been the girl? She wasn't even sure there was a girl, but, quote, the bastard was running awful funny. Could have been carrying someone. Full moon noted again. Talk of curfews and hunting parties for a rogue animal began circulating. Mr. Smith. The half-empty bottle of amber liquid stood sentinel on the table. Newspapers scattered across said table vied for attention, with headlines like Full Moon Fiend Strikes Again and Rogue Animal Claims Third Victim, with articles talking about how full moons affect behavior in animals. Less savory publications speak of lunar cycle killer and full moon killer, werewolves among us. Bunch of simpering fools, Mr. Smith sneered softly. He placed a third pin on his wall map, as near to where Sarah vanished as he could. Speaking so confidently of matters they know nothing about. He pulled the thread tight and secured it, poured himself a glass from the bottle, slowly sipping the liquor as he contemplated the map. Present day. Inhuman legs find purchase under his body, and suddenly he's moving, running, racing, no longer a mewling human denying the change. He is primal power. He is ancient instincts let loose on a modern world. All the hunting prowess of an apex predator, given the keen edge of a human mind. Trees flash past him as the moon urges him on, million sounds whispering in his ears, countless scents drawing and tempting him. Calm. Focus. Ignore the unimportant, the distractions. Focus. All that matters now is the hunt. Victor Hartman. Have I mentioned this is crazy? Only about 100 times. Victor sighed as the old pickup rumbled along the old dirt road. Yeah, well, it is. Ben Digby muttered, hands clutching the steering wheel like he was moments away from turning the truck around and jamming the accelerator to the floor. I must have been nuts letting you talk me into this, Vic. You know what my dad'll do when he finds I took the truck without asking? Oh, and his hunting bow and new arrows? Ground you for life? Piped up the younger boy in the bed of the truck, holding onto the side and talking through the open rear window. Eric was Victor's brother, 15 as of last month, and the second his older brother had suggested hunting down the mad bear, he'd all but begged him to let him come. He had his new .22 rifle, a couple of boxes of bullets, and total confidence in Victor. Didn't matter that all of the Eastland, including Yardland County, and their very own town of Deercross was under curfew. Didn't matter that the head of the Forest Ranger Service went on TV to announce that all parklands, including fishing and hunting areas, were closed to the public until the wild animal they suspected of all the kids going missing was caught or killed. Victor said they were going to kill it. They were going to kill it. Ben was less certain. He'd been friends with Vic since they'd been in grade school, and he wasn't sure the other boy had gained a lick of sense between ages 6 and 18. Still, what did that say about him, who kept following the other boy from one grounding to the next? Worse, he called back to Eric. If he doesn't kill me for taking Betsy, he'll skin me if anything happens to his bow. Eric sighed again. These two had been like this since they threw their hunting gear in the bed of the truck and rumbled off. Nothing's gonna happen. We're gonna find the bear, we're gonna kill it, and we'll be heroes. Big words from a man who had a single-shot shotgun back there with a box of 12-gauge slugs. Still, he figured if he combined that with Ben's bow and Eric's .22, with a lever action because a little weirdo wanted to hunt cowboy style, whatever that meant, that should be more than enough for any of the black bears around the Eastland counties. As they pulled off the road and into the thicker woodlands, the trio fell silent again. They were all rural boys, hunters, sons of hunters, grandsons of hunters, etc., and so on. And it didn't take some fancy college degree to figure out that this critter was hiding. It always hit near woods, carried off its food, and didn't leave too many tracks. It obviously was denned up in the thick of the north woods, where the trees broke up search parties, hid the floor from choppers, and the local stinks even boggled the average tracking hound. Perfect area for a smart and vicious bear. Hunter logic. They parked the truck in a clearing where they were all familiar with, the better to find if they got split up. Made sure their clothes were zipped and sandwiches were distributed, Eric had insisted, and, well, since their grandpa Hartman always said it was bad luck not to have a sandwich on you when you were hunting, then it was time to go lock and load. Victor checked the brake action on his shotgun and slid a shell in place. Ben adjusted and tested the tension on the bowstring with a frown that went far beyond concentration and into, "This is a bad idea," while Eric made sure the lever moved smoothly but not too smoothly and started loading bullets, ignoring the sudden insecurity that came with watching his brother fill his vest with thick slug shells, or the strong arrows with the razor-sharp heads Ben was sliding into their quiver. Those looked like bear stoppers. His felt more like he was loaded for squirrel, raccoon at best. Still, too late for such doubts now. He kept the barrel pointed down like Pops had taught him, and when all three were ready and showing orange, they started off down the deer path. That was Vic's idea too. Follow the prey trails, find the predator. Sounded like a good solid hunter logic then. Now it felt like lambs gamboling merrily to the butcher's door. They moved until they were out of each other's sight, but not hearing. To keep from spooking or alerting the bear, they made natural sounds. Victor would make a cricket click, Eric a bullfrog's croak, and Ben an owl's hoot, repeating every 5 or 10 steps. Click it, broop, woohoo. Click it, broop, woohoo. Click it, broop, woohoo. Rustle, rustle, snap. Eric froze. Even if he couldn't see it, he felt Ben do the same on his left. His big brother hadn't responded in over a minute now, going on 2. The sounds coming from his direction sounded like something large dragging something else through the underbrush, forcing it past grasping twigs. Eric's mouth went dry as his feet shuffled him forward at an angle, and when the thick foliage they were in finally parted, the scene before him was painted in horrid moonlit tones. Something was holding Victor. Eric had never seen his brother so still. One arm flopped down to hang near the... It's not a bear, is it? It kind of looked like a bear, but it's shaped wrong, and it was too hairy. It moved wrong, making noises bears shouldn't make, and even as it grumbled and growled softly, Eric could hear a gasp, and then a clatter as an arrow slipped from nerveless fingers, signaling Ben had seen what he saw. And those 2 noises caught its attention. Its head began to rise, to turn, and the idea of seeing the face of this nightmare was too much. Eric screamed and fired, the crack of the .22 louder than a cannon as it shattered the near silence. He heard a roar, and with more instinct than thought, levered and fired, levered, fired, levered, fired, over and over until finally the hammer hit empty. And Eric realized the roaring was getting softer and softer, further away. The area where the thing had been showed signs that something large tearing through the brush and branch, and on the ground was something metallic. Vic's shotgun. We gotta track it. We gotta save Vic. Eric's hands shook, 22 rounds falling softly to the floor as he struggled to reload. Ben grabbed his shoulders and yanked him around. We gotta get to the truck. We gotta get back to town and find the sheriff or something, because that thing was a fucking monster. But Victor, we can't help Victor if that thing tears our heads off. Come on. No more stealth. No more signs or whistles or whatever. Just a mad scramble back to Betsy, barely aware of tossing their gear into the bed before slamming the doors and screeching to drive back to town as fast as the old engine could go. They weren't aware of their surroundings. Hell, they could barely see the road in front of them from tears and terror. If they had paid attention, though, They'd have seen the other hunter watching them, seen him look down the trail they'd come from, and follow it at a brisk run. Mr. Smith. "God damn it!" he hissed as he threw off the ghillie suit, the shaggy fabric fluttering as it fell on the couch. He tossed the high-powered taser and the injector of tranq onto the table with the file folders and the liquor. He yanked the bottle from the table, all but broke the neck to open it, and took a long pull before hesitantly pouring the some over his shoulder. He felt the alcohol burn in the wounds. Fucking hell. They weren't big rounds, he could tell. Between the pop of each shot and the fact that he didn't feel like they'd gone in more than an inch or two, they burned like shit. He's probably lucky the ghillie suit had broke most of the momentum, that the little brat hadn't hit him in the head or the neck. Still, it's gonna be a bitch getting them out, and his timetable had just jumped up. He pulled the sandwich he found on the new boy out and bit into it. PB&J. Not bad. He'd gotten cocky tonight. That was on him. He thought maybe he could get a threefer instead of following his rituals. Still, the boy was healthy, like the others. His associates overseas would pay well for fresh labor. He took another swig and considered the four of them. The girls would probably end up maids or waitresses for some oligarch or shaw's son. The boys, well, if they were lucky, they'd be put to work in a factory, chop shop or something. If not, well, he wasn't sure there were actual fight pits, but he wasn't going to say there weren't actual fight pits either. The hell was that? His shaved head turned to stare at the back door. Probably his cargo waking up and getting the first inkling how deep in shit he was. The other three will probably start talking soon. "Oh, don't make noise. If you make noise, the cattle prod comes out." He smirked. He might just go out there and do it anyway, put the fear of God in the little monsters, make himself feel... That didn't sound like kids in cages. Present day. He'd seen the boys come screaming out of the woods. Their terror must have been complete not to notice an almost 8-foot wolf beast some 10 feet behind their truck. The thing was, though, there were 3 scents on the truck, and only 2 coming out of the woods. He followed their path. The 3 scents in all this green reminded him of the first. Of the boy on the bicycle, Henry, he later learned. He'd seen him that night, just when he'd entered the woodlands. It took all of his control, but he'd sworn he wasn't going to be a monster. He'd sworn on his mother's grave. He'd been so proud when he'd resisted hunting the boy that he'd not only brought down a deer, but treated himself to a berry bush on the way home. He still remembered the cold dread when he read the paper the next day. The boy went missing? Had he slipped? Blacked out and chased down the young man like prey? No. He knew deer blood when he tasted it. No human had fallen to him that night. But it bothered him now. The boy's scent was in his nose, and he'd gone back quietly to see what he could find. Nothing much more than the police did. Maybe it was just bad luck. Terrible things happened after all. Then a girl had gone missing, and another. He'd visited both scenes and scented, finding the girls, and something else. An older scent. Foul. As though a life of ill will and violence could ooze out of someone. He'd overlooked it for Henry. With Melissa and Sarah, it only became stronger. The foul, the hunter of youth, the enemy. Now he came to the last place the 3 boys had been together. He smelled gunpowder, the unknown boy, blood, The foul one's blood. It was a rich yet rancid scent mixed with motor oil? Bah! Who cared what it was mixed with? Follow the blood. The trees whipped past. Hunt. Find. Avenge. Henry, Melissa, Sarah, and Victor. Henry and the girls had stopped whispering when the four-wheeler came screaming out of the woods. When they talked, they got hit, or worse, cattle prodded. The bald freak had a new boy, who he shoved into one of the empty cages and locked, before groaning and leaning on the wall. After a minute, he'd slammed his way inside and locked the door. No meal tonight, it looked like. The limp figure in the fourth cage stirred. Guess the freak didn't get a full dose into him. Victor sat up, banged his head on steel, and winced. The fuck am I? Shh, hissed Sarah, nearest to him. Keep quiet. If he hears us talking, he'll get the cattle prod. Victor blinked and blinked again. Even without lights, the full moon and his own adjusted eyes could make out the three people in dog cages. They looked familiar. You're Sarah? Shh. Yes, I'm Sarah. That's Henry, and that's Melissa. Where? Hell. Henry whispered as loud as he dared from 2 cages over. We're in hell. Weird, animal cage, psycho kidnapper, human traffic, hell. Human traffic? Oh shit. Yeah. I don't think it's that situation. I think he said something about labor camps or unpaid laborers. Slavery. Just call it what it is. Henry's glare was firmly on the cabin door. Sure. Whatever it is, we're fucked, Sarah finished. Victor looked around slowly, his head still spinning. Can't we break out or riot or... We're pretty sure he drugs the food and water. Not much, just enough to make us all distracted and weak. She sighed. Henry tried not eating. He just beat him until he did. Victor winced, pretending not to see the tear of shame in Henry's eyes. What about her? Melissa. I think she's either in shock or the stuff in the food is reacting with her. She doesn't say much. I'll go home. Except that. Victor leaned back in the cage as they finished whispering. Oh God, what was he gonna do? He wanted to go home. He wanted to see his family. He wanted this nightmare to end when he woke up. He didn't want to... The bushes across from the cages shook. All 4 of them suddenly went deadly silent. Even Melissa's half-glassed eyes focused. There was something there. Some deep-seated sense from the age of humans as prey species, warning them. A heavy sniffing sound. 2 eyes that glowed like embers behind lantern glass focused on the cabin. The thing stepped out into the moonlight. Later, the 4 of them would agree never to admit, but the moment their eyes finally took in the looming beast, gray-furred, fangs and claws like blades, they all lost control of their bladders. It seemed to study them at first, those nostrils at the end of the snout drawing in their scents. It seemed pleased. It moved closer, and the 4 of them edged away from the doors. But it ignored them, sniffing at the freak's ATV. With an almost disdainful air, it gripped the vehicle under the handlebars and hurled it into the woods. Then it sniffed again. It sniffed the ground. It sniffed the dark drops that were invisible to the young human's eyes. It looked at the door and snarled. Mr. Smith. Don't open the door. That one clear thought rang through Smith's head as that sound vibrated the wood in front of him. He'd been about to go out and see who the hell was messing with the ATV when that low, angry sound activated every primal survival mode in his head, screaming to run, fight, stand still, try to hide in a tree, under a rock, build a defense, make a fire, do something! His eyes flicked to the taser still on the desk. Wasn't much, but he had a feeling he didn't have time to unlock the gun cabinet. He'd almost reached it when the door exploded inward. The shards flew past him almost in slow motion. His eyes barely took in the clawed hand that slid back outside, only to realize he couldn't see outside. Just a huge, furry mass and two bright, glowing eyes. The demon, the monster, the beast of his nightmares began squeezing through the door until it could stand at its full height, ears back, head almost touching the ceiling. Those burning, hate-filled eyes took in his prize wall, the map marking each abduction, complete with ID cards to mark each kid. It took in the desk with his tools and his files for each of them. It flashed to the slightly bloody ghillie suit. Then those eyes, those horrible eyes, came back to rest on him. Those eyes were something much worse than a wolf or an enraged man. This was a werewolf with a purpose. Lips curled back over razored teeth, and he could swear it spoke to him. Found you. Present moment. Muscles bunched, eyes focused, claws extended, push off the ground, pounce, the screams, cut short. The hunt is over. The feast begins. Henry, Melissa, Sarah, and Victor. When the combined Eastland patrols followed an apparent forest fire into the northern Hellbrook woods, they weren't sure what they'd find. No forest fire, after all. First was a cabin. Front door locked, back door destroyed. Inside, carnage that was once a human body. Evidence of crimes that would later be linked to said body, real name unknown, currently Mr. Smith. Outside they found what appeared to be cages for medium to large game. There'd been 7, all of them destroyed, doors ripped from hinges. They found a bonfire that seemed to consist of a trashed remains of an ATV and a lot of broken wood, mostly tree limbs and such, dragged to a shallow pit that looked like it had been dug in a hurry. And they found Henry Kilbourne, missing 3 months, Melissa Traker, missing 2 months, Sarah Tillman, missing a month, and Victor Hartman, who'd been reported missing less than a few hours before. They were seated near the fire, wrapped in blankets later identified as having been taken from the linen closet in the cabin. They were all undernourished, save for Victor, badly bruised and suffering from being drugged, including Victor, yet they were all still alive, and they all smiled when the rescue team was called in. When later interviewed, they all gave very similar results. Hit hard and fast, tased, then drugged, waking up here or on an ATV coming here. The abuse, threats, and ill treatment Mr. Smith rained on them. Yet, none of them could give a clear response when asked what had happened this last full moon. Victor said an act of God's judgment. Sarah mentioned something about a mythical beast, fury made flesh. Henry had just shrugged and said, "You wouldn't believe me." Melissa just sighed and smiled. He was such a good doggy. I gave him a kiss on the cheek. They let them all go back to resting after that. Clearly the trauma had been too much for them. As for who or what attacked Mr. Smith, the results were still unclear. Track casting didn't match any known carnivores in the area. Analysis of fur, saliva, and blood came up with heavy human contamination. The eyewitnesses were, as stated, unhelpful. The case was closed as Mr. Smith's death being the result of attempting to use some kind of large exotic animal as a pet and accomplice in his kidnappings. And yet, the rescuers that night swore they heard a lone wolf's howl far in the wooded distance. Others noted the death of Mr. Smith was on a full moon. Should it be so surprising that to this day, the good people who live in Eastland counties speak of having a guardian werewolf?